Hi there, and thank you for joining us on the Overcomers Overcoming podcast. We feature those who are in the process of overcoming or have overcome any type of life encounter, life obstacle that at the time seemed to be almost insurmountable. With this podcast, we have three objectives in mind. Our first objective is we want you to know with a confident resolve you are not alone. We want to work with you. We want you to know there are others who are working with you, who want to help you through whatever you are encountering, and together we will get through whatever you're experiencing.
Our second objective is there are multiple options for any life encounter you are facing. We want to help you develop a resolve that there are various options and solutions to any life dilemma.
Our third objective is to help you with critical thinking skills. If you're encountering something that was possibly a decision you made sometime in the past, and if you had the opportunity for a life redo, you would make a different decision. We want to help you with those critical thinking skills that can help you make an informed decision and not encounter what you're going through at the moment. We are the Cooper Culture, a veteran-owned business. We work with business personnel and families to develop and sustain connected relationship cultures within their families and organizations. That type organization is one where people feel wanted, appreciated, and genuinely a part of that organization. I'm with my wife and business partner, Marty, who is helping me facilitate this podcast. Today we feature Grace Tran, who describes her past of doubting herself, and it's a result of a family culture, as she describes, with no intent to blame anyone, but to assess how it was that caused her to have a low image of herself, low self-worth. As she reflected on the past, she could pretty well put together those things that caused her to think the way she did. She's now turned herself around to where she has a healthier self-image, and she's helping others to deal with and overcome any past feelings of negativism and not knowing exactly who you are. She deals with the topic imposter syndrome. Marty, what are some takeaways our listeners can gain from Grace?
Grace felt she wasn't accepted in the family, or wasn't accepted because she didn't understand math with her father. When we're born, God didn't provide instructions for the child. And so some parents or family members, and it may not be parents, it may just be someone else, when we expect the child to be like we want them to be, but they weren't born that way. They were born with another interest. Say, math was not her interest, but she had other interests. If we look at our children and realize they may not be like us, we find their sweet spot, we help them so they can be confident people in this world.
And I think it is a matter of adapting to learning styles and strengths of another person. Let's listen and learn together. It's a great life testimony. Grace, thank you so much for joining us. Our listeners are going to be very interested, very intrigued in just a very brief summary of your life. As I understand, part of your life, earlier in your life, you were very critical of yourself, maybe to the point where you doubted your self-worth and so forth. There were a lot of things surrounding that, but our listeners are going to be very interested in your self-reflection. Can you look back and determine why all of that formed in your mind? It appears you are over at least most of that, albeit we're all on some sort of a journey. We're always learning. Grace, thank you for joining us. It's great to have you with us.
Thanks for having me. I'm really passionate about this topic. So yeah, I'm more than happy to share. Yeah, a little bit of my backstory for people listening is I grew up, so I'm in the San Francisco Bay Area, in the heart of Silicon Valley. The education system, a lot of people actually immigrated here from other countries to succeed. So this is like, you know how there was like the gold rush back then, like now it's also another form of the gold rush in terms of technology, work success, career advancement. Me being a daughter of immigrants, it was even more ingrained in me, work hard, like make your family proud. And I never thought those by itself are not bad things at all. But I never knew growing up the consequences of some of the patterns I was so deeply ingrained in myself and what that was actually doing, not in terms of an external sense, like externally, everything looked great. I was achieving really well. I was getting into great schools and getting great jobs and just getting all these awards and accolades. And it felt really good, externally, but internally, I never knew I was using a lot of it to cover up, insecurities or feeling not enough or feeling like I have to hustle and work hard. Otherwise, who am I? Just to give a little glimpse into how, I have come to this eye-opening journey when I basically was in, like, I would say a few years out of college, I started to notice about myself, there are some internal things that keep irking me. Like, for example, I will get so triggered when there are competitive people around me, when like at work, in work settings, for example, and I would be in a meeting, there would be like dominating personalities and I would just shut down and I would feel very irritated, shut down, not be able to speak up. That's just one example, but there are many others where I was like working really late at night. I knew in my head, this is not an end all be all. This is not life or death. Why am I slaving away every single night and working on weekends just to impress this one manager or this one director in the company? And so there are like little moments like that. And I just kept sweeping them away. It's so easy for us to sweep things under the rug and just be like, just move on, just keep achieving. You're doing great. But then I kind of stumbled upon actually the world of coaching, counseling, therapy. I was like, let's just give it a try. Heard good things about it. I don't know. I don't think I need that much help. Like I'm a pretty good person. And that's when you need the most help. And so I started to notice a lot of these counselors and therapists, they would tell me, Grace, you seem like you're very hard on yourself. Have you ever taken notice of that? And I would just think, hard on myself? Like, this is normal. This is what I'm supposed to do. Like, this is the right standard. Everyone else is too lazy, like if you're not working hard like me, then you're the one who's in the wrong. Over time, it started to seep in even more. And through this journey of self-discovery, I found so many things I never even realized when I was younger growing up. For example, we were talking earlier about like childhood experiences. I had so many moments with my dad, for example, who he loved me, he wanted the best for me, but he really did not emotionally connect with me growing up, and he didn't know how. He wasn't equipped. Because of that, I was always trying to earn his approval. I was always trying to see the smile on his face or hear like a good job. And rarely in my life have I ever heard him say good job. He was always very critical, very, I would do one thing and then he would say, that's not good, like do it this way instead. So that's just one example. But I went through the journey and I'm very passionate about this. I think everybody, if you haven't taken the time yet to look inside your own journey, there's just so many things to be found and unraveled that will give you so much more clarity on what is driving and perpetuating the unhealthy behaviors and mental patterns, emotional patterns that are keeping you stuck and inhibited from living freely. And how do you, once you identify that, then you can overcome it. And so that's why I love your podcast about overcoming things, because this is exactly what I believe people don't realize is they can overcome these things. It just takes the courage of seeing inside what's happening.
Grace, thank you for being so transparent. A couple of things I processed from what you're saying, and certainly tell me if I'm not processing it correctly. One, you sought an emotional connection with your dad you did not have. And I want our listeners to know very quickly, we're not here to blame, but as we go through a life assessment, it is important that we men know how important we are to our daughters, our sons, our families. the emotional connection. Two, another thing that I process from what you're saying, and it may not be entirely accurate, you were raised in a very competitive environment. Your dad, I can picture, is very technologically competitive. You may have felt at some point your dad saying, well, Grace, you're not keeping up with, you're not as fast as, or you're falling short in any number of ways that can be processed. I'm reading into this, Grace, that you process that as, well, I'm just not good enough and I'm not where I wish I were. And maybe those thoughts were churning in your mind. And please, I'm not trying to suggest anything I said is accurate, but I am processing what you're saying as possibly you experienced some of that.
Yes, you are spot on, Ron. Not You're very insightful. And I think that's exactly what part of what I was uncovering in my journey was not even realizing the impact that those words had on me. For example, you're exactly right. Like my dad, people don't actually realize the weight of a father's role. Like parents in general, very important, but especially I personally believe, and I think the father's role really imparts identity and confidence and encouragement to confirm, like, yes, you are great, you're wonderful. And when you hear those things as a kid, it really empowers you. But when you don't hear those things as a kid, you don't realize it, but there's this inner, I think as human beings, we just long naturally for this inner, I'm okay. I'm great in my father's eyes. And I think for my dad, one example, as you were talking about that, my immediate flashback is when I was a kid, I would have countless nights where I would be just struggling with my math homework. Math was not my forte. There's a generalization that Asians are good at math. And I was like, I don't even fit the stereotype. What's wrong with me? And then especially because my dad, he was an engineer. He was like the top, like math was his bread and butter. So for him trying to tutor me, trying to teach me, and I didn't get it, we would have so many arguments, not just arguments, but, growing up, I would feel so bad. I would feel like, why can't I get it? Why, my dad's so frustrated at me and this is my fault. And if I was just smarter, but I never really vocalized those things. It was just like my internal tracks. And, it was only much later on as I'm going through this journey, working with these personal coaches and counselors, I realized, wow, there is still, like, this is why one example is I used to live in Australia. Actually, I'm not from there, but I was living there. And when I was about to move there, my dad was so against me moving there. He was like, why would you ever move there? Like, you're throwing your career away. And like San Francisco, like the Bay Area is the best for your career advancement. But I was trying to explain to him, like, this is what I deeply feel called to and I'm supposed to do. And it's not like he had this misconception of why I was doing it and what would end up happening. Fast forward, everything worked out so great. But I remember in moments like that where I'm making a life decision and my dad is like so against me, I had just like sleepless nights. I had chronic, physical symptoms, stomach aches, just all these signs of worry and anxiety because my dad didn't agree and didn't approve of my life. So that was always like looming in the back of my mind, like, why doesn't he get it? Why can't he just approve? And then even though I'm doing things that, I know are what I want to do, but there's always still that lingering, self-doubt or insecurity, lack of confidence, imposter syndrome. And a lot of that was tied with this inner deep longing that if only my dad approved, then I would be okay. And if he doesn't approve, maybe he's right. Maybe I'm totally in the wrong. Maybe I'm throwing my life away. So a lot of that has been really healing to look at and face and confront, and then kind of go even deeper to that and be like, why do I have this need for validation and external approval? And how do I find my self-worth so that I'm not looking to other people outside of myself to have that sense of self-worth?
Grace, I want to thank you on behalf of our listeners for being so effectively vulnerable in everything that you're sharing. You're expressing confidence in being able to do that. What you're expressing is, Dad, I want your emotional connected approval. I don't feel I have that. Dad, I don't understand math. My learning style might be very different from yours. Dad,
Mhm.
you're not adapting to me. But Dad, I don't feel like I can even express myself to you
Yeah.
because I don't feel our relationship is good enough that I can meaningfully express myself without maybe you getting angry. In Grace, what that causes some of us, I did this in my early life, I would withdraw. I would go into a shell. I would isolate. I would never ask a question because it just verified I'm stupid. All of these kinds of things, I'm sensing you may have experienced something of that nature.
Yes, yes, completely. And I think, it becomes so normal just to withdraw, to shut down, to put up emotional barriers because you don't want to feel that pain and you don't know how to communicate it in a way that's not going to end up to give you more pain, right? You don't want to you're walking on eggshells because like anything you say might blow it up even more. And so that's exactly what I learned was my unhealthy coping mechanism was to just keep working, to just keep achieving so that I avoid people looking down or being disappointed or me feeling bad about myself, or I would just help everybody else and make them happy, but I wasn't, noticing what I personally needed. And so it's hard because those things, those coping mechanisms, actually, no one can see what's unhealthy underneath because on the outside, it looks very good. If you're working hard, you go above and beyond, your bosses are like, oh, you're such a star, person on the team, or you're such a great leader. I got a lot of that affirmation, like you're a great leader, you're very responsible, proactive, you're always thinking about other people. Like these are all great traits, but you're exactly right. Like actually when we withdraw emotionally, that's what kind of eats us up inside, and we don't know how to cope with that in a healthy way. So yeah, I feel like one thing I'll just add is nobody is perfect. All of us, we are flawed, we are broken, and I never expected my parents to be perfect either, but I think it's so healthy to realize, okay, what are the ways that, my imperfect parents, they tried their best, but what are the ways that maybe they didn't know how to equip me or connect with me in ways that I needed or meet certain needs, and how can I take ownership of that and address it head on myself so that I'm not operating out of this lack or deficiency.
Yes, and there are a lot of us, a lot of our listeners who have some very admirable traits. Yes, I can believe it, Grace. You are a great leader. You have a lot of admirable traits, but I'm going to believe internally, and you use the term masking, you were living a facade. You
Yeah.
were not being the true person. You didn't express your internal feelings. But there may have been some thoughts that I'm not connecting all the dots. I'm not sure you would use that term, but for you to be the great leader that you are capable of being, you need to have the confidence.
Mhm.
And there are some of us who severely lack confidence. And there's some of those dots, if I could call that, or attributes that I don't feel I have to really put it all together to be. Grace, I'm sensing that was a part of your life, but I want to transition to if there was a moment, a person, or it could have occurred and maybe is still occurring over a process journey, when did you start to make the turn for the better that I can be a better person? I can be the person God created me to be. He wants me to have the confidence and be the leader. I just need to change things. And maybe it's changing a mindset. Can you work us
Mhm.
into that, Grace?
Yes. Yeah, that's a great question. We always want to point to there's like that one thing that changed everything. And honestly, looking back, there were multiple moments, like little nudges, little seeds, and they all just culminated. I would say two in particular I can think of that were especially powerful. So one of them being when I met my husband, actually. It's a long story. If anyone's interested, we talk about it on YouTube and on our podcast as well. But it's really a divine miracle how we met. We met when I was in Australia Australia and he was in California. Never thought anything would happen out of it. We met accidentally in a Facebook group and fast forward, we were married almost 3 years now, but through dating him and then marrying him, I was always very struck by his ability to just be accepting of me even when I'm a total mess. When I'm, I have all this struggle and I'm overwhelmed and nothing's going right and I'm just a mess. I'm having mental breakdowns, I'm freaking out. And instead of him trying to like fix my problems or be like, oh, it's okay, think positive, he just sat with me in it. And he would say over and over again, I understand. It's good that you're crying, like things like that. And it was just so healing for me because I was taught growing up, my mom, she had good intentions, but she taught me like, look on the bright side, at least this. And I was taught to think positive and think happy thoughts, or again, not bad, but I wasn't ever taught how to just be in my realness, in my real mess and be okay with that, not dwell in there forever, but like feel what I'm really feeling. And so just receiving that compassion from my husband and experiencing that, the empathy, the compassion, the acceptance actually taught me, oh, this is the kind of compassion I can have for myself. Like I'm okay. Like I'm not any less of a person just because I don't have my stuff together. He's right. Crying is healthy. So, I always felt better just like getting it out rather than bottling everything in. So that was one. And then the second one I think is, it really has to do with my faith as well. Like I really realized, I think this was around actually last year when I took a little semi-sabbatical. I was having this like crisis moment in my life. Like, am I even doing what I'm supposed to be doing? And so I just got away for like a week, just made space in my life because I knew that, if I had my work stuff around me or even my familiar environment, I would just constantly be thinking of all the things I needed to do. But last year was really pivotal for me because it stripped away. I was just like questioning everything. But then when I got away and I had emptiness, I had margin, I had space. And that's when I heard so clearly, like personally for me, like from God about like who I am, what I'm supposed to do, like why I've been feeling all these things, just like divine revelations that like years of therapy couldn't help me with, and so I'm all for therapy. I'm all for coaching and counseling, but I feel like both for me and my husband, we're emotional health coaches now. We always tell people, if you are a person of faith, we firmly believe God gave us both our spiritual connection with him as well as the practical tools and tips that we can combine together. Just like, going to the doctor for help, we're not meant to do it on our own. And so I feel like that was very healing for me. It set me on a trajectory where I knew that, just like what I said about my husband being with me in my mess, I knew that God was also with me in my mess, and his compassion for me. He wasn't a judgmental God, like being like, you have to get your stuff together before you come to me. He was like, come to me with all your burdens and I will give you rest, So that has been very, very transformative for me, just learning to integrate all of myself and just sit with myself and accept myself, self-acceptance. And I would say that.
The term acceptance is extremely important. I am believing there was a three-way acceptance in your life, Grace, not necessarily in this order of priority. Your husband unconditionally accepted you. Yep, it's okay to express your emotions. I'm just here to listen. Just go ahead, and expressing yourself can be very cathartic. A second acceptance is, I'm reading into what you said, I, Grace, had to learn to accept myself. And by accepting myself, I learned my strengths. I learned where I'm having shortcomings. I learned about my facade and why I was living a life of facade. And then a third was God accepts us exactly as we are, unconditionally. Come to me just as you are. I'll work on you from the inside out. And I'm sensing, Grace, that was somewhat of a three-way acceptance that led to maybe a transformative journey maybe terms you wouldn't necessarily use, but that's what I'm sensing was the process that got you on and is putting you on a very healthy life journey.
Yes, yes, exactly. I was literally talking to one of my mentors yesterday who told me, Grace, I've seen your journey. I've walked with you, and you today versus you 1 year ago versus 2 years ago, like you've been completely transformed at every stage of your journey. And so I feel like that's what's so exciting about this is you're never at an end state because there's always things that you can work on and improve on and learn about. We're never going to be perfect on this side, but it's really amazing looking back and seeing, how much I've grown, how much I've been able to grow more confident in and self-assured about. And for example, now when I go and spend time with my parents, I'm no longer like triggered when my dad says something and I'm like holding everything in, like, please don't blow up. Now I can actually find myself being calm and collected. And it's okay, he has those opinions. Like he doesn't know, he doesn't understand, we don't connect on the same level. So it just gives you so much more peace and ability to navigate all the different rocky waters of life, because now you have an anchor. Now you have a strong anchor of like, this is who I am, this is what I know about myself, this is the truth, rather than being tossed here and there based on what people think of you or based on how your circumstances are. And so I would say, if anyone listening is like, you can relate with that a bit, you're not really sure where to start, I would say start with exactly what you said, like learn to accept yourself, because the more you don't accept yourself, the more you have shame, you have guilt, you are afraid of being honest with yourself because you don't want to confront all the things inside that are potentially like things that you need to weed out, that you need to unroot. But it's only when you unroot the false belief systems, the false narratives you learned as a kid, that you can actually get to true freedom and healing instead of putting a band-aid on top.
And one thing we tend to do when we feel unworthy, we feel we're less than what we want to be, we have a tendency to isolate and go alone, just go off somewhere. Well, I don't want anybody to know about this, and I don't know how to express it. I don't know who would listen to me. I don't know, and a lot of all these kinds of things. I'm going to guess some of the people in your lives were the first ones to see you are going through a very positive transformation because they can see the smile in your face. They sense the disposition that's very different. You're more talkative. You're more joyful, if I could use that term, than you have been in the past. Those are outward signs that, yes, Grace, you're going through a very transformative period. Now, I'm curious, there's probably not been a quick turnaround to this. I'm just going to guess your transformation is probably still a lifelong journey, but yet it has occurred over a period of time. As you reflect on this, can you give us an idea, Grace, just how long maybe your transformation was, or how long you've been in this period of transformation?
Yeah, I would say like it all started sowing seeds, like sprinkling seeds in my life around 2018, so about give or take 5 years. And it's crazy how much could happen in 5 years. I am literally a completely different person. Yeah, I just actually saw a friend I haven't seen in a long time at a wedding a couple weeks ago, and she was just commenting on, wow, you're different, Grace, in a really good way. And it's just funny because there is, when you're in a journey of transformation, there are many points where it is very uncomfortable. It's like you're so rooted and familiar with your old habits, with how other people perceive you. And you also attach your identity with a lot of these traits. For example, I would always say yes to everyone. And so as a people pleaser, it was extremely uncomfortable for me to start practicing saying no to things when I felt like it wasn't genuinely, like I was doing it out of obligation or guilt, or I was so tired, but I didn't want to say no because I felt bad. And so when I started saying no, I started getting pushback. People would be like, oh, like, why? And some people didn't understand, especially, family members. And that created a lot of tension. But that really, it first of all strengthens you. And it's also necessary, when you go through a journey like this, because you're going from like a caterpillar to a butterfly. You do need different things to nourish you along the way. And that means you're going to have to say no to other things that don't serve you anymore. So I would say, like, going back to what you were saying about this is a lifelong journey and how much happened within 5 years. I'm really excited because 5 years from now, when I look back, I know I will be also a different person in a really good way. I know I have lots to learn, but I just want to pass on. And this is what me and my husband are all about. We're very passionate about, is passing on the lessons we've learned so far to help others grow as well, to help others taste and see the freedom that is awaiting them, because there's so many people just stuck. And a lot of people are stuck for decades, but you don't even know, like 1 year can change everything. 2 years can change even more. And yeah, that's what I would encourage people.
That's great. I will tell you that scripture says God created us in his image. I know as well that we function best with connected relationships. And one of the leading proponents for you was your husband, and you two have that very strong connected relationship. And you mentioned a mentor, and we all can function best with a mentor. And when God is at the top, and I use a triangle metaphor, that when God is at the top of the triangle and we are both focused on him, we are going to grow together. But Grace, let's bring this in for a landing. I want to have you if you could talk one-on-one with the person, with the listener right now, who says, if they could talk with you, they would say something to the effect, Grace, I feel so stuck. I've got no confidence. I don't know who I can tell. I don't have any connected relationships. I don't even know where to start. Can you tell me how to even get a start, Grace?
Yeah, great. I love your questions, Ron. This is perfect because a lot of people do feel that way, that exact way. And I would say, number one, it's okay. It's okay. You're not alone. You're not abnormal. These things are what everyone struggles with. They just don't talk about it. So just know you're not crazy, and it's okay. I think a lot of people feel guilty for even thinking that. And the second thing is just start small. Like, you don't have to imagine yourself like, oh, I need to be completely healed and freed of all these things right away. It's a journey. And actually, it's in the journey. It's not even about the destination of becoming this perfect person. It's actually in the journey. That's where the real treasure is, of learning all these things about yourself and it gives you empowerment. It gives you strength, and it makes you realize I am an overcomer. It makes you realize I'm not a victim to my circumstances or my pain or what's happened to me. I can do something about this. And so practically, it means find a trusted, safe person that you feel like you can unload like your real self with. And that person also ideally would know and be trained in how to process it with you in a healthy way. There's a big difference when you talk to someone who's a friend and you're like, oh, I'm having such a hard time with this person. And they're like, oh yeah, they suck. You should just just shut them out of your life. And versus when you talk with a trained coach or therapist or counselor who can sit with you and help you process through the mess. And that's really, it changes everything. It's a game changer. So I feel like if you haven't yet, it's worth the investment to look into that and seek help, because the best investment you can make is in yourself. It amplifies every other area of your life, spiritually, emotionally, professionally, relationally, physically. And yeah, we're happy if anyone is interested and would like to reach out. We can either see if we're a good fit to work with you, or we can recommend other people that would be a better fit for your needs. But that's really what we're all about, is helping people find that freedom and that healing. And it just starts with asking for help.
Grace, thank you. On behalf of our listeners, I want to thank you for your sincere candor. I want to ask you, and it's a little bit unfair, would you consider coming on for an additional episode, at least one more, to help our listeners get out of the rut they are in, develop a connected relationship? I think it involves a mindset decision. I think it would be good for our listeners to learn more about that, unpack that just a little bit more, but we have to make a decision to make the transformative change to get out of where we are. Would you be willing to come back and unpack this a little bit further?
I would love to. It's one of my favorite things. So thank you.
Thank you, Grace. On behalf of our listeners, thank you for this episode, for unpacking your life, being so effectively vulnerable. We look forward to another episode with you. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Looking forward to it.
We appreciate having the opportunity to share our and our guests' life experiences with you.
The Cooper Culture advances organizations to achieve and sustain high retention rates, connected communication, and trust through personality insights and principled leadership. You can contact us at our website, thecooperculture.com, and you can contact us directly at ron@thecooperculture.com or Marty, Marty, at thecooperculture.com. We work with you to help assess aspects of your culture to advance the environment and people to their best performance. We do that through our staff of certified personal performance coaches, leadership trainers, keynote speakers, and DISC personality behavior experts. You can book a speaking engagement directly through our website by contacting us at ron@thecooperculture.com. We look forward to sharing our life experiences with you, some of which are profound, some of which are pretty funny. Some of those life experiences are ones we'll never do that again because we've been through stuff. We truly look forward to working with you, speaking with you, helping advance you in any way that we can.